This story took place between 2009 and 2013, starting when I was around 17. We lived in Karachi, Pakistan, and at the time, my family owned a 3-story building. If you were standing in the front of the building, you would see 2 metal gates. One was for the ground floor, which was our clinic, and the other was for the staircase. On the 4th step of the staircase, we had an entrance to the right side of the ground floor clinic, and the staircase went up to the 1st and 2nd floors. My father was a doctor, working from 9 to 5 at a government hospital, and from 7 p.m. to 12 a.m., he used to work in his private clinic on the ground floor of our building. On the 1st floor was our home, and the 2nd floor we rented to another family. I have a twin brother, and in 2009, we started college. Our father was very strict regarding our education. He was overprotective due to the increasing crimes in our neighborhood. For educational purposes, he did not allow us to stay at home in the evenings. He thought we might not study and just play video games on the computer. Instead, we had to stay in our clinic so that he could help us with our college work. He would teach us about physics and science. Our normal routine was very strict. We used to go to school from 8 a.m. until 2 p.m., then take a nap for a few hours. Then we'd go down to the hospital and study with our father until 12. He used to give us study targets and also see patients. Our neighborhood was really creepy. Kidnappings, killings, and murder were common things for us. We also had a night security guard with a privately purchased AK-47. This gun belonged to my father, and the security guard had to place the gun in the clinic after he finished his nightly duties. One evening at around 4 p.m., someone knocked on our door, so I answered from the telecom. The guy introduced himself as Rayhan, and he was looking for a guy named Sam. Sam was also my friend, and his home was right next door to my building. This guy Rayhan also knocked on my friend's door, but no one answered. A passer saw this guy desperately knocking on the door, and nobody was answering. He turned to him and told him to try our door because we were friends. This passerby was also our neighbor. Since my brother and I were really locked into our routine, we never missed a chance to go out. I saw this as an opportunity to take a break, so I told my mom, "Someone's calling. I have to check who it is." She tried to stop me, but she also knew that I really wanted to go out, so she allowed it. I went down to meet this guy. He looked like a gentleman, and he had a 125cc bike. I greeted him and told him I was friends with Sam and that I could help. I knocked on Sam's door, and when his mother saw me through the narrow metal gate, she opened the door. I went inside. Sam and his elder brother were sleeping at the time. I woke Sam and told him that somebody was looking for him at the doorstep. After hearing this, his elder brother, still half asleep, told Sam not to go out. I checked the time, and when I did, I saw that around 30 minutes had passed since I entered the house. Once again, we heard a knock at the door. This time Sam's brother got up and checked. He saw 4 guys out there. They were his friends, not Sam's. He came back inside and told his mother that his friends were outside. Sam's brother went out after that. I headed out too. When I went outside, I saw Sam's brother and his 4 friends were walking towards the street. I headed home, and when I reached my staircase, I heard 5 shots. I turned around and watched from the holes in our staircase gate. There were people gathered around. I saw many of my neighbors had come out to investigate. Then I noticed a horrific scene. Sam's brother was covered in blood. He was still conscious and looking around at the crowd. Those 4 guys were standing by him, tied a rope around his legs. They then dragged him to an electric pole and tied him to it. Then his mother rushed out of the crowd. Before she got close, they started shooting at her as well. She fell down instantly. As I was watching this, someone grabbed my arm and pulled me. When I turned around, I saw that it was my father. He didn't say a word, just kept pushing me until we were at our doorstep. Then he gave me an eye sign to go up. He didn't even have to say it. I went into our apartment, and I was shaking. As I entered our home, my mother was already waiting. When she saw me, she started crying. She must have heard the bangs and knew I was out there. I saw my father come from behind me with a gun. In our street, there were 2 bodies lying there, and we were still hearing gunshots. But it was not a back and forth fight. When they tied Sam's brother to the electric pole, he was still conscious. Then they opened fire at him point blank. All 4 guys were standing there, and they opened fire at the same time. The story doesn't end there, though. We heard that Sam's brother was involved in a ransom with these guys, and that there was something personal between them. No one was coming forward to report the case to the police. It was likely a gang situation, and people were scared. My father had a friend who was a deputy general with the police. He knew about the case and suggested that my father file a report. On his suggestion, he filed the report despite my mother's reservations. The police caught all 4 of those guys, and then they called to tell my father. I recognized the guys and gave a statement against them. They were all sentenced to jail, but while they were being transported, they tried to escape. 3 of them were killed trying to escape, and 1 of them was wounded, but did successfully get away. The deputy general of the police called my father and gave them the news so he could increase security and remain vigilant. We did not notice anything odd until 2013. By then, my father passed away due to a heart attack. Sam joined a gang in order to get revenge for his mother and brother. His father died when Sam was 2, so he really had nothing left after that fateful night. Unfortunately, Sam also died in a shootout. Me and my brother were in our final years of university. He was doing a software engineering program, and I was taking electrical engineering at the same university. In October 2013, my brother and I had time off before exams, so we left our home to visit our mother. The first day was normal, but on the second night at around 2 a.m., I woke up. We heard gunshots right down the street. We were all shaking and praying. With gunshots raging outside, our doorbell started to ring rapidly. It was our tenant from the second floor. He came down to us on the first floor. We were trying to figure out what to do, because somebody was out there shooting, and we were worried he would get in. My mother called my father's friend, the deputy general of the police. He didn't pick up the phone initially, but after the 3rd time, he finally answered. He told my mom he would send police. You should know that policing in my country is not good enough. Even after receiving emergency calls, police often don't respond quickly. If they're in the mood to visit, they will. If not, they'll just make excuses, no matter what kind of emergency it is. Our night security guard also didn't respond. We had to act before they broke in. My tenant had an old shotgun. He brought his gun with only 5 rounds and stood on the staircase. If they broke the metal gate, then the staircase would be the only way they could enter the other apartments. After 1 hour of desperate firing at the gate, they broke into the staircase where our tenant was waiting around the corner. Then we heard firing in our staircase. After a few shots, everything went silent. We thought it was all over, and we were waiting for our fate. We didn't dare to come out, but thankfully, our tenant was still alive and still had 4 rounds left. So when the guys broke in, they just started rushing towards the apartments. Suddenly, my tenant saw someone from the stairs. He fired his gun first, and the guy fell instantly. They finally left, and the police arrived at around 6 a.m. On the same day, we moved to my aunt's house in another city. After we graduated, my brother, mother, and I migrated to Hamburg, Germany. I write this story as my mom is playing with her grandkids in her room. My mother and I still remember Sam. He was my friend, and he was intelligent, loving, and caring. But his life ended too soon. I'm Ashley, and I used to work in a large city. My office was right near the area with many hospitals. I would walk past that area almost every day, and I would often see various patients outside, just getting some fresh air. The hospitals were always bustling with activity, doctors and nurses running to and fro, and the sounds of ambulances and sirens never seemed to end. Despite the chaos, There was something eerie about the area, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. One day, when I was walking to work, I noticed an old man sitting in a wheelchair on the sidewalk. He was slumped over, his head hanging low. He seemed to be close to death. His face was wrinkled, and only one of his eyes would open, it seemed. I don't think I had seen him move more than a few times since I saw him. It was like he was frozen in time, a living statue of a man who had given up on life. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease whenever I saw him, although I felt a little guilty. As the days passed, I continued to see that man sitting in that same spot, day in and day out. He never moved, never spoke, and never acknowledged anyone who walked by. It was as if he was a ghost, a figment of my imagination. But deep down I knew he was real, and that something was not right about him. One day, I was coming back from lunch alone, and I saw the man again. I was walking towards him, and I could feel my heart pounding. As I was walking past, he suddenly spoke my name.
Ashley.
I stopped in my tracks, frozen in shock. I knew I had never told him my name, so how did he know it? I slowly turned to face him. I saw his one eye was open, and it was staring right at me. I walked over to him, not thinking. When I was in front of his wheelchair, he reached out and took my hand. His touch was cold like ice. I could feel my skin crawling. He then said,
Your mother loves you.
Those words sent shivers down my spine. My mother died earlier that year, and no one knew about it. How could this old man know? Was he a ghost? A messenger from beyond? I didn't know what to think, but I knew I had to get away from him as quickly as possible. I pulled my hand away and ran back to my office. My heart was still racing. I never saw the old man again. I'm sure he must have passed away shortly after, but I'll never forget that feeling of his cold hand on mine, or those words he spoke. Was he trying to tell me something, or was it just a cruel joke? I may never know, but one thing is for sure. That old man in the wheelchair was not of this world. I'm Rishi, and this happened last summer. I broke my leg playing rugby, and I had to spend almost a week in the hospital because it was a pretty bad break. I was even on an IV for part of it. The hospital was an old rundown building, and it had seen better days. The walls were yellowed with age, and there was a musty smell that seemed to linger in the air. There were many doctors and nurses walking around, dressed in their white coats, but I didn't even recognize most of them during my stay. My room was on the 4th floor, wide open with 4 beds, but I only had one roommate, a man who never spoke and seemed to sleep all day. On my second night, I woke up and saw someone standing next to my bed. My eyes shot over to my roommate's bed, and it was empty, so I figured it must have been him. I said hi, but he didn't answer. Remember that I couldn't really move because of my leg. The figure was tall, with a gaunt face and dark circles under his eyes. He was dressed in a hospital gown, but it seemed to be hanging off of him as if it were too big. He stood there staring at me, before slowly turning towards the door and walking away. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. Eventually I fell back asleep, and when I woke up, my roommate was in his bed and seemed to be sleeping. Every night following, he got up and did something strange. One time, I saw him next to my bed, and he was tampering with my IV. I panicked and called the nurse. When she walked in, he had already gone back to bed, but I couldn't help but feel that something was off. One night I woke up and found him standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me with a blank expression. He reached out and touched my arm. I could feel his moist skin on mine. I screamed, but no one came. I laid there until the morning, and when the nurse found me, I freaked out and begged to be moved to a different room, but no one believed me. Besides, they told me there were no other rooms available. As the days went on, I started to feel weaker and weaker. The doctors couldn't figure out why, but I knew it was because of him. He was slowly draining the life out of me. I confided in one of my nurses, but she didn't believe me. She thought I was delusional from the pain medication. I begged the nurse to check my IV because I thought he did something to it. She said it was fine, but I was still scared. When I was released, they put me in a wheelchair and my mom pushed me out of the room. I looked back and saw that guy in his bed. He sat up and glared at me. I could see the hatred in his eyes, but I never found out why. To this day, I have no idea who that guy was or what he was doing to me, but I'm glad that I'll probably never see him again.